In this video, we're going to be talking about Fantasy Grounds Classic campaign data organization. So we're going to be going over topics of grouping our information, using prefixes to force sorting orders to make things easier to find, identifying, copying entries, and otherwise organizing the data of your campaign to make it useful and easy for DMs and players to interact with the data and run your games. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to be using the core RPG rule set. And so the topics discussed here should be applicable to just about every rule set that comes with Fantasy Grounds. It's usable with Fantasy Grounds. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. When we're talking about organizing our data, first I want to, at a high level, discuss the different kinds of data that we're going to be organizing. Now, when we connect here, you see here along the right-hand side, we have a variety of different data banners. And I've created this little simplistic graphic to try and demonstrate some of the relationships about how we'll, at a high level, we'll organize our data. Now, you can see here that most of the data types end up flowing down into the stories and maps. Now, at the highest level, both the story entries and the map entries are going to be the most frequently used entries to hold and organize and store all of our data. Typically, you'll have story entries, and it will contain links to any of the relevant information that it needs to link to, and other types of data information that's relevant to that part of the storyline. And maps also, you can have overland maps, high-level maps, organizational maps that have links to relevant information, as well as battle maps that have links to room descriptions and other things like that. And we'll get a hold of that and take a look at that here in a little bit. But to go over the kind of high-level data types that we have here in Fantasy Grounds, we'll start off with our items. You can ignore templates for now. But our item entries are descriptions and properties of individual items within within Fantasy Grounds, and those usually refer to some kind of physical object within the game: a sword, shield, armor, some kind of a piece of treasure or something, and it'll have properties like its cost and other things like that. Item entries are usually grouped together into parcel entries. So your parcel entry will contain one or more items, and your parcel entry will also contain information like the money or coins that are located within the parcel. Parcels make it easy to group these things together so that they can be quickly and easily given to players, either directly to their inventory or to distributed to the players via the party sheet. Our NPC records are a record of all of the information, the stats, the attacks, defenses of everything related to that NPC. So the NPC records are able to be added to the combat tracker. They'll contain things like the tokens that are going to be used when this NPC is placed on a map. Any related statistics about it, its health, and all of that sort of things are going to be located in the NPC record. Now, don't get confused with the term token. Other virtual tabletops may use the words differently. In Fantasy Grounds, your NPC record is your official record for that NPC. A token is just an image, so your NPC record can contain a token showing what image is to be used for that NPC record. The token itself, as seen down here in the bottom right, is not the NPC record. That's just a picture or an image that can be used. NPCs are often usually grouped together in encounter records. So an encounter record will reference the NPC definition, and we can tweak a few things like the name and the pictures that are being used and stuff like that here in the encounter record. And the encounter record makes it easy to add a group of NPCs to the combat tracker. We can also use the encounter record to pre-place the position of those NPCs onto maps so that when they are added to the combat tracker, they'll automatically be placed on the map as well. Additionally, we have tables. Tables in this case are rollable tables, defined here in this banner here on the right-hand side. And tables allow us to output a variety of different types of things. We can randomly generate various kinds of output. So tables can be used to randomly generate parcels with various items in them, with various amounts of coins. Tables can also be used to automatically output encounter records so that they can be done as random encounters. Tables do have the capability of being output as story entries, but there is a more powerful way of creating nicely formatted story entries via story templates, which we won't cover in this video. But tables allow us to output to all three of those types, and we can also output to the chat if necessary. Quest entries usually contain some kind of information that the players need along the way. So it's often used as kind of a series of records of what the players are currently working on, what their current quests are. Our map records are going to contain links to a variety of things. So in entries like overland maps or kingdom level maps, where you're not tracking the individual players' locations, you may have links pointing to major cities or centers of government or points of interest. On battle map type organization, you'll find you have links for descriptive elements of each room, and we'll cover that in a little bit. And then our story entry, you can see everything kind of feeds into the story, and that's because the story is the high-level entry that we use to link all of the rest of these. So this is kind of just a high-level overview of the different data types within Fantasy Grounds. Now, other rule sets may have additional data types that can be used, but this is the base types that are familiar across most of the rule sets. All right, let's get into the actual data itself. We're going to use story entries. For the most part, all of the data types here are going to follow this same structure, this same window appearance. There will be grouping up at the top, and then there will be a listing of the individual entries, and they appear like this. So we can go ahead and start off by creating an entry here by clicking the edit list and adding an entry. This creates us a new story entry. Now, when we're creating story entries, up at the very top, we can give it a title. You can be as descriptive as you want. You can, name it whatever's going to be relevant. My story entry 1, and you can call it whatever you would like. When you create multiple story entries, create 2 or 3, you'll notice that it is sorting them alphabetically. And as I create entries, it resorts the list alphabetically here. If there are more than 100 entries here in the, for example, in the stories, then it will go ahead and create multiple pages worth, and you can select the first page, second page, third page, and each page will display 100 entries. So there will be a scroll bar, and you'll scroll down to 100, and then you'll go on to the second page, and there will be 101 to 200, and so on and so forth. Now, organizationally, because these are sorted alphabetically, if we have a particular order we want them to display in, for example, we have a cavern that has 10 different rooms. First room is called the hatchery, second room is called the egg-laying room, the third room is called the queen's nest or whatever, and so forth. If you label them just by their name, then the order here will be just sorted alphabetically. And that may not be convenient, that may not be efficient for you to work with. It may make it harder to find certain kinds of information. So oftentimes it's helpful to organize our information using prefixes. And what I mean by that is, instead of starting off with just the name of the entry, let's call this, say, 01.001. And we'll say test 2 is 01.002. And you'll notice after I type in the name of the entry, I hit the tab key, and that forces it to commit the new name and save it, and then it resorts. So you can see now here 001 comes first, 002 comes next, and if I name this one 01.003, it'll go ahead and sort next. Now, let's say I have a bunch of these, 20, 30, 40, but I don't want all of them to be 001. I can go ahead and create these as 02.001. I can create them as 00.001. Call this an introduction. And you'll notice that that will now be sorted up at the very beginning because 00 comes before 01. So you can organize and structure your data here in a way that makes sense. You can have all of your information laid out and done in the order that makes sense for ease of use. Now, there's a secondary level of organization, and that is done through grouping. So as you can see, by default, the all group is selected. Now, when the all group is selected, that means it's going to display all of the story entries that are contained within your campaign. Now, another thing is that when you load a module, for example, if I come here to modules and I pick a module and I load it, that one only has images and maps. Let's find something that has anything there. Location. All right, so I have a module loaded. Does it? Nope, that's. I'm trying to find one that has story entries in it. Any of these have story entries? There we go. So this one has some story entries in it. Now you notice when I have the module loaded, it loads up all of the story entries. Here I've got the group set to all. And then on the right hand side, it lists the module that they are part of. Now we can filter that list and just show the elements from a particular module by clicking on this all group. It's a drop down and selecting the name of that module. Now that allows us to filter it out and shows us just the entries that are there, that are located within that module. But if I switch back to the all, it will show everything that's currently loaded in my campaign. Now, we can take advantage of these groups by creating our own groups to organize our information. So with the all group I mentioned has all of the things that are currently loaded in this Fantasy Grounds campaign. The other default group that's created is the new group, or that's displayed is the new group. Now the new group will display entries that do not currently have a group assigned. Meaning there's nothing here on the right hand side. They don't belong to a module or they don't belong to a group. They have not yet been assigned to any particular group. And they will appear here in new. So while we are here, if we create any new entry, like new entry, then if we switch over to new, it will appear. If we switch over to the one from the module, it obviously is not here on this list. Now we can create our own new groups by dropping open the drop-down list and clicking on this Edit List button, clicking the green plus, and we're going to give this a group. Now you can create groups for whatever you would like, things that make sense organizationally. So for example, I could have a group for a kingdom of happiness. So I've gone ahead and created a group, and if I select that group, there's nothing in there. It's an empty group. Now if I switch back to all or new, I can go ahead and reorganize by moving information into that group. So let's say I take these and I can just drag and drop them, and you'll see that here on the right side they've now been assigned to that group. Now that means that once they've been assigned, they will no longer be in this new. So if I select new, it no longer shows those entries. If I select the kingdom one, it shows those entries because they've been reassigned to that particular group. So the groups, being able to create your own groups allows you to organize and coordinate the information. Now, just like we did for story entries, you can use prefixes for the groups to organize them there, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, whatever, in order to make things sort the way you would like them to sort. Some other little things of note is if you are in a group, so for example, if I'm in the Kingdom of Happiness group and I create a new entry, my new entry, it will automatically create it within that group. It's going to be automatically assigned to the group that you are in when you create the entry. However, if I am in the all category, then Fantasy Grounds doesn't know what group to apply your new creation to. So it will appear in the new group. It will not have anything assigned, just like all of these others that we created. If we create something while in all, 1, 2, 3, it'll create it here and nothing is assigned. And then I can manually, of course, go ahead and reassign it to any group I would like. Now, even with loaded modules, I don't recommend it, but you can, within your campaign, drag and drop entries into other groups. So I can grab this Samarkand Sans product information and drag it to my Kingdom of Happiness group. You notice the icon here changed. That means that I made a edit to this module. Now that edit is only local to this campaign. It doesn't apply if I loaded this module in another campaign. But now in this Kingdom of Happiness groups, I can see that entry now belongs to it. Right. So using prefixes here on the individual entries, using prefixes if necessary, and using groups to organize your data is a great way to put your data into a structure that is going to be usable and easy for both players and DMs alike. Now, this same organizational structure is easily usable in story entries, in quest entries. It has the same grouping capabilities, NPCs, encounters. Everything will have the same type of organizational structure. Now, something that I've found to be handy is when I'm creating, for example, a story entry that has a list of encounters or parcels or things like that. What I'll often do is I'll name them according to the same naming scheme. So if I have entry 01.001 as my story entry, and I want to link an encounter, I can create my encounter and I'll call it 01.001, A, B, C, D, E, whatever. And then I will drag that and link to it. Oh, I didn't... Okay, so I will now drag and link to it, and it'll create the link. Now, another tip is when you're creating links to entries is to always include the type in the name. So once you've created the link, then you can just type in encounter to know that this points to an encounter, because otherwise you just have a link and it could point to a story entry, a quest, a map, an encounter record, a parcel, whatever. But by naming them the same thing, the encounter record is named the same as a story entry, I know that these two are relevant to one another. I can do the same thing with a parcel for the treasure that they found at this particular location. If I create a parcel, I can call it 01.001 A, B, C, E, D. So now that I've got my new parcel created, it's got some information in it, I can link to that as well. Drag and drop that link, and then add parcel to the beginning. And this way I know that as I'm reading through the entry and I've come to the information, I can click on this and I know it's going to bring me to the encounter record. I can click on the parcel entry and I know it can bring me to the parcel, and that it's easy to find out which ones are applicable to which locations if necessary. All right, the next little topic I want to cover is identification, copying entries. So oftentimes when we are working in Fantasy Grounds, we will have information that we want to make a copy of and then provide some tweaks. This could be things like NPCs that you load from a source book, a monster source book. If we come here to the NPC records, we've got all of the records loaded from, for example, in 5th edition, the monster manual could be listed here, or some kind of a bestiary. But those entries from the module are not able to be edited. They're locked down and you can't edit any of them. Now, within Fantasy Grounds, you cannot make edits like that to the module that's been marked as locked. But what we can do is, for any of those entries, is we can create a copy and then tweak the copy. So let's say this sample NPC is a locked record and can't be edited because it belongs to some kind of a module. I can create a copy of just about any record by clicking on the link to it, dragging it a short distance away, but within the same window, and then letting go. And you can see here that that's now created an entry. Now this process works for all data types except for images and maps and tokens. So with images and maps, if I attempt this same thing, I'll come here to some of the images that I have. If I go ahead and drag and drop and attempt to make a duplicate, you notice it gives me an error record. It says image records cannot be copied. That's the only ones. But here in the NPC record, I've gone ahead and created a copy. Now this copy is unlockable and available for me to tweak and edit. I can call it something else. I can change its stats. I can do whatever I need to directly there on the copied entry. All right. Now this will be handy for NPCs. It can be handy for story entries, tables. Any of those types of data can be copied over. So next up, I want to talk about identification. So within Fantasy Grounds, there are 3 record types which have the ability to be marked as either identified or unidentified. And what this does is it changes what information is displayed to the players, the name of the entry and what's displayed to the players. So the 3 different data types are images and maps, NPCs, and items. In each case, images and maps, for example, if I open up an image, NPC record, open up an NPC, and item. So in each of these 3 data types, up at the top, you will see this green circle with the letters ID in it. In maps, it's here in the middle. And for items and NPCs, it's located up near the top, you can see here. And there's also going to be a field, a text field. One is going to be the name, and the other is going to be the unidentified field. That allows you to put in a separate name to indicate what they are for when it's what it will be displayed to the players when it is unidentified. Now, in different rule sets, there may be reasons why certain items are unidentified. For example, magic items in 5th edition are usually unidentified because the players don't know the properties of the item until they've had a chance to actually attune with it within that rule set. So for each entry, we can put in, if you leave it blank, this unidentified section blank, it'll just use the default one, unidentified item, unidentified creature, unidentified map image. Otherwise, you can put in, for example, in this sample NPC, you can say a goblinoid if you want that to be its unidentified name. And then its more specific name, a goblin archer or something along those lines. So you can toggle back and forth just by clicking on that button, and it'll change to a red or a green, and that'll change what the players, again, see about the individual entries, the names that's being displayed for them. For NPCs, it changes what's displayed on the combat tracker. For items, it hides a bunch of the fields from the players so that they can't see the properties of the item. For maps, it just changes what the title of the map is when it's marked as unidentified. All right, so I mentioned in the beginning that we're going to take a look at the 2 different map styles and how you can organize the information there. So let's take a first look at an overland map. Let me pop open a kingdom map here. It's just a simple little map. And we're going to start defining areas and points of interest with story entries. So let's go ahead and create, we've got this, let's go ahead and delete these. And we'll start creating some new areas here for our map. So first off, we have the capital city of Toliov. So let's create an entry for Toliov. And I can include any information about the city that I want. And so I've got my entry now. Now, to make this useful for me as a DM, I want to be able to link to the information directly from the map. So I can just go ahead and drag that entry and drop it onto the map. And you'll see it creates this red pin. So we're going to use this for any kind of point of interest. Let's say the Caves of Chaos are located somewhere over here. At the top, we'll have the Lake Anne located somewhere over here. And you can see this process. You can go through and label all of the different interesting cities, points of interest, anything like that that you want here on the maps. And then when you're ready to play with it, when you're ready to use it in a game, then to reference it, all you have to do is click on the pin and it'll pop open that entry with the relevant information. So we're going to do the same thing. You can see here how we've done it for the kingdom level maps. And you reference all the information. And each one of these can link to additional ones, as I showed earlier. If I open up that story entry and say, you know, let's say this needs a link to Lake Anne. And I can include a link to Lake Anne so that when I open it, it opens up that Lake Anne entry. So I can organize my data that way. Now, the other type of map interface is when we're talking about this kind of battle map scenario. So in a battle map scenario, very similarly, we'll create, we'll call this Caves of whatever. We'll select our new group that's specific to this battle map, and I'll create a bunch of entries. Say, well, room 1 entrance, and then I can drag and drop room 1 entrance onto there. Now within this story element, I can include things like a description of the room, links to any encounters, links to any parcels or treasure, description of environmental effects, or traps, or whatever. Whatever is needed for me as a DM to run that location. So I can do all of that. I'll create now room number 2, entryway. And so I can link that. And again, same kinds of elements I'm going to include here. 03, hidden room 1. And then I'll just follow this process as I go throughout the entire dungeon or system. And then as my players are added to the map, add them down here, and as they proceed through the map, at every location I have the information that I need in order to run that location. I have any descriptive elements, I have any encounters linked, any treasure parcels linked, to make it easy for the DM. So those are a couple of different things that you can use, different techniques that you can use to organize your data here in Fantasy Grounds to make it easy to use. If you do organize it well, then it also makes it easy for you to, when you export that data into a module and then load that module, it will also have that nice organization already built in. If you don't organize the data, then it can be confusing where certain data is residing. If things are not prefixed properly, then they can be all out of sorting order. So for ease of use, you can use all of these different techniques to improve the organization of your Fantasy Grounds campaign. Thank you.